Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our female blazer practical drafting class. Next is to draft a notched collar for this basic female blazer jacket, chest size 36 inches, and it is sleeves. Using a step-by-step method that I will be showing you. Just watch this video up to the end. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let us jump straight to our notched collar and sleeve practical pattern drafting class. First, I tape my laid front pattern like this so that it doesn't move when I start inserting measurements to it. After, I go ahead and prolong this shoulder drop working line. Also, I extend this lapel break line. Now, I get the back pattern. Remember, this back pattern is cut on fold. So I first mark 0.5 inches seam allowance. Then I measure from this center back all round to this seam allowance point. Here I have 3.75 inches. Now, at this point along this lapel break line, I measure upwards copped back neck measurements 3.75 inches here. Then at this 3.75 inch point, I draw a perpendicular line like this. Still at this point along this line, I mark outwards 2.75 inches. This point and line is just a guide for getting the correct shape of the collar. Okay. Also, I come to this neckline point. I mark inwards 0.25 inches. I connect this point to this point in this way. And I blend this point back to the neckline. After, I remeasure and shift the copped back neck measurements to this line. I mark 3.75 inches here. Then, at this 3.75 inch point, I draw a perpendicular line like this. Still, at this point along this line, I mark diagonally 3.25 inches for collar with this. Then I come to this point. I measure inwards 1.25 inches. Still, at this point, I mark upwards 1.25 inches. Then, I connect these points with a diagonal line like this. Also, I connect this 1.25 inch point to this 3.25 inch point to create the collar width outline. After, I go ahead and shape the collar in this way. Ladies and gentlemen, we are done with the collar drafting of this pattern. Next is to trace out this collar to a different pattern paper. Depending on the style you are working on, you can still separate the collar stand from the main collar if you want. So at this point, I mark inwards 1 inch for the collar stand. After, at this point, I create a collar stand seam line like this. Then I blend it to the lapel break line. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are done with the collar drafting. Next is to draft the sleeve for this pattern, and it will be a one-piece basic sleeve. I get my new pattern paper, I fold it, then I draw one horizontal line at the top of my pattern paper, which will be the starting point for most of my calculated sleeve measurements as well as the sleeve head. After, I continue determining other horizontal working lines that are needed for this sleeve drafting project. First is to determine the sleeve length or the sleeve hemline. From this starting line or sleeve head, I measure downwards my sleeve length. In this video, my sleeve length is 24 inches, so I mark 24 inches here. Then I square across a straight line. Also, from this sleeve hemline, I mark downwards 1.5 inch for sleeve hem allowance. Also, I square across a straight line. Next is to determine the sleeve bicep line. From this starting line or sleeve head, I measure downwards chest measurements divided by 12 plus 2 inches. In this video, my chest measurement is 36 inches. I divide by 12, giving me 3 inches, plus 2, giving me 5 inches. So I mark 5 inches here. Then I square across a straight line. After, I now go ahead and insert calculated sleeve measurements to these horizontal lines accordingly. I come to this bicep line. I measure inwards chest 36 divided by 4, giving me 9 inches, minus 1 inch, giving me 8 inches. So I mark 8 inches here. After, at this 8-inch point, I draw a diagonal straight line like this. Next is to mark the sleeve cup opening. I come to the hemline. I measure inwards chest measurement 36 divided by 6, giving me 6 inches, minus 1 inch, giving me 5 inches. So I mark 5 inches here. Then I connect this bicep point to this cuff point like this. Next is to shape the sleeve at the elbow line. I measure this distance from bicep to hemline, divide by 2 to get the midpoint. So here is the midpoint. Now, from this midpoint, I mark upwards 1.5 inches for the position of the elbow line. Then at this elbow line point, I mark inwards 0.75 inches. After, at this 0.75 inch point, I draw the shaped lines in this way. Next is to work on the back side of the sleeve. I come to this slant line. I measure this distance. I divide by 2 to get midpoint A. Also, at this midpoint A, I measure this distance. I divide by 2 to get midpoint B. At midpoint A, I mark upwards 0.5 inches. At midpoint B, I mark upwards 0.25 inches. Then, Using my free hand, I connect these points together to create the back sleeve cap head. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost getting done. Next is to trim off the excess from the sleeve pattern. Now, this is the back side of the sleeve. Next is to work on the front side of the sleeve. I trace out the back side like this. Then at midpoint A, I mark upwards 0.25 inches. At midpoint B, I mark downwards 0.5 inches. As you all know, always the front armhole is deeper than the back armhole. Then using my free hand, I connect these points together to create the front sleeve cap head. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this pattern collar and sleeve drafting class. I hope you've learned something out of it, and it has been the most requested video you've learned. We still have more classes. This has just been the basic way of drafting these sleeves, the sleeves. But for the collar, you can go ahead and use this. Master one of the formulas and you see that it is helping you in your career in the fashion industry. So guys, our collar and sleeve drafting is as simple as that. Bye for now. See you in my next video. Shalom. God bless you all. I sign out.